My name is Daniel Chen, and I sat at my parents' dining table listening to them tear apart every choice I had ever made. It was my younger brother Kevin's engagement party, and the house was full of relatives celebrating his success. Kevin had just been promoted to senior manager at a prestigious consulting firm. My parents couldn't stop bragging about him. Meanwhile, I sat quietly in the corner, trying to be invisible. But my father wouldn't let me disappear. "Daniel works at some bank," he said dismissively when my aunt asked about me. "Nothing important. Just entry-level work. We don't really talk about it." My mother added with a sad smile, "We had such high hopes for him. He was so smart in school. But then he chose banking instead of medicine or law. Such a disappointment." The words hit me like physical blows. Disappointment. That's what they called me in front of 30 relatives. Not their son. Not someone who worked hard. Just a disappointment. My brother Kevin smirked from across the room, enjoying my humiliation. He had always been the golden child, and he loved reminding me of my place in the family hierarchy. I wanted to stand up and leave, but I stayed frozen in my chair. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing how deeply they had wounded me. But inside, something shifted. I was done being their disappointment. After dinner, I escaped to the backyard, pretending I needed fresh air. Really, I just needed to breathe without feeling their judgment pressing down on me. My cousin Lisa followed me outside. She was one of the few family members who had always been kind to me. "Don't listen to them," she said gently. "They don't know what they are talking about." I laughed bitterly. They made it pretty clear what they think of me. Disappointment. That's the word they used. Lisa hesitated, then asked, "What do you actually do at the bank? Your parents always talk about it like you're a teller or something." "I work in corporate lending," I said simply. I didn't elaborate because I had learned over the years that my family didn't actually want to know. They had decided I was unsuccessful, and nothing I said would change their minds. "That sounds important," Lisa said. "It is," I replied. "But they'll never see it that way." Back inside, I overheard my mother talking to her sister. "Daniel's 32 and still single, still living in a tiny apartment, still working at that bank. Meanwhile, Kevin has everything figured out. We're so blessed to have at least one successful son." I felt my hands clench into fists. I had spent 10 years building my career, working 70-hour weeks, earning promotion after promotion. But none of it mattered to them because I hadn't become a doctor or lawyer like they wanted. The breaking point came during the toasts. Kevin stood up with his fiancée, thanking everyone for coming. Then he looked directly at me and said, "I want to thank my parents for always believing in me and pushing me to succeed. Unlike some people, I didn't settle for mediocrity." Everyone laughed. My parents laughed the loudest. I stood up quietly, grabbed my coat, and walked out without saying goodbye to anyone. Nobody tried to stop me. Nobody even noticed I had left. I drove home to my apartment, the one they called tiny but was actually a nice 2-bedroom in a good neighborhood, and sat in the dark for a long time. They thought I was mediocre. They thought I had settled. They had no idea who I actually was or what I had accomplished. And maybe that was my fault for keeping it quiet. I had always been private about my success, never wanting to brag or show off. But that humility had cost me their respect. Tomorrow, I decided, things were going to change. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I was done hiding who I really was. They were about to learn the truth about their disappointing son. And it was going to shock them. What my parents didn't know, what I had never bothered to tell them because they never asked, was that I wasn't just some entry-level bank employee. I was the vice president of corporate lending at Metropolitan Trust Bank, one of the largest financial institutions in the state. I had started as a junior analyst 10 years ago and worked my way up through pure skill and determination. I managed a portfolio worth over $500 million. I approved or denied loans for businesses, real estate developments, and high net worth individuals. I earned a 6-figure salary, had stock options, and was being considered for promotion to senior vice president. My colleagues respected me. My bosses valued my judgment. Clients specifically requested to work with me because of my reputation for being fair but thorough. But my family saw none of that because they had decided I was a failure before they ever asked about my actual job. I lived below my means intentionally. I drove a reliable used car instead of a luxury vehicle. I wore simple clothes and didn't flash expensive watches or jewelry. I had learned that real wealth was quiet, and I preferred it that way. My apartment, which my mother called tiny, was actually 1,500 square feet with a view of the city. I owned it outright, no mortgage, completely paid off. The Monday after Kevin's engagement party, I walked into my office at Metropolitan Trust Bank with a new determination. My assistant greeted me with coffee and my schedule for the day. I had 3 loan approval meetings, 2 client calls, and a presentation to the executive board. It was a typical busy day. At 10 o'clock, my boss Richard called me into his office. He was the senior vice president of the entire lending division, and he had been my mentor for years. "Daniel, sit down," he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. "I have news that I think you're going to like." I sat, curious. Richard smiled. "The board has decided to restructure the lending division. We're creating a new position, Executive Vice President of Residential and Commercial Lending. It's a huge role, overseeing all mortgage approvals, refinancing, and commercial property loans across 5 states. My heart started beating faster. This was the kind of position people work their entire careers to reach. "The board wants you for the job," Richard continued. "You've proven yourself over and over. Your approval rate is exceptional, your client satisfaction is the highest in the division, and you've never made a bad call on a risky loan. They want to promote you effective immediately." I sat there stunned, processing what this meant. This wasn't just a promotion, it was a complete game changer. I would be overseeing hundreds of millions in residential mortgages and commercial properties. Every major lending decision would go through me. Richard explained the scope of my new role. I would be responsible for final approval on all mortgage renewals over $500,000. I would oversee a team of 15 loan officers. I would report directly to the chief financial officer. And my salary would increase substantially, enough that I could buy almost anything I wanted. "There's one more thing," Richard said, sliding a folder across his desk. "Part of your new responsibility is reviewing flagged accounts. We have several mortgages coming up for renewal that have some concerns: late payments, credit score drops, financial instability. You'll need to decide whether to approve the renewals or deny them." I opened the folder and started scanning the list of flagged accounts. There were about 20 properties listed, all with various issues that required executive review before renewal. My eyes stopped on the 3rd entry. The address was instantly familiar, it was my parents' house. The mortgage holder was listed as James and Susan Chen. My parents. Their mortgage was up for renewal in 60 days, and it had been flagged because of 2 late payments in the past year and a significant drop in their credit score. According to the notes, they had taken on substantial credit card debt and had been struggling financially. I closed the folder and looked up at Richard. "When do I start?" "Today," he said. "Congratulations, Daniel. You've earned this." I walked back to my office in a daze, carrying the folder that contained my parents' financial fate. The irony was almost too perfect to believe. Over the next few days, I settled into my new role. I moved to a larger corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. My assistant coordinated my packed schedule of meetings, reviews, and client calls. And I reviewed every flagged mortgage account carefully, making fair decisions based on financial data rather than emotion. Except for one account. My parents' mortgage sat on my desk, untouched, while I decided what to do. According to their file, they had taken out a substantial home equity line of credit 2 years ago, probably to help fund Kevin's expensive lifestyle. They had been making minimum payments on high-interest credit cards. Their savings had dwindled significantly. They were financially overextended, and the bank's risk assessment flagged them as potential default candidates. Under normal circumstances, their renewal would likely be approved with stricter terms, higher interest rates, shorter repayment period, possibly requiring additional collateral. But technically, I had the authority to deny the renewal entirely if I deemed them too high risk. I wouldn't do that, of course. Despite everything, I wasn't cruel. But I also wasn't going to make it easy for them. They would have to come in for a formal review meeting. They would have to explain their financial situation to a bank executive. And that bank executive would be me. I scheduled their appointment for 3 weeks from now, giving them time to receive the official letter requesting their presence. Then I waited. 2 weeks later, my mother called me for the first time in months. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. "Daniel," she said, her voice tight with stress. "We need to talk to you about something." "What's wrong?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. "Your father and I received a letter from Metropolitan Trust Bank. They're saying our mortgage renewal has been flagged for executive review. We have to go in for a meeting with some vice president. Do you know anything about this?" I paused, letting the moment stretch. "Metropolitan Trust is a big bank, Mom. I wouldn't have any information about your personal accounts." "But you work there. Can't you find out what's happening? This is very stressful for us." "I work in corporate lending," I said truthfully. "Not residential mortgages. Those are different departments." It wasn't a complete lie. Technically, residential mortgages had been a different department until my promotion combined them under my oversight. But she didn't need to know that yet. "Can you at least ask someone?" she pressed. "Please, Daniel. We're worried." "I'll see what I can find out," I said, even though I already knew everything. After we hung up, I allowed myself a small smile. They had called me for help. The disappointing son who worked at some bank was suddenly important enough to ask for favors. The irony wasn't lost on me. My mother called 3 more times that week, each time more anxious than the last. She wanted me to use my connections at the bank to find out what was happening. She wanted me to put in a good word for them. She even suggested I could explain to someone important that they were good people who just had some bad luck. I gave her vague responses each time, neither promising help nor refusing it. Let her worry. Let her stress. Let her wonder why the bank was suddenly scrutinizing their finances. Meanwhile, Kevin called me for the first time in over a year. "Hey, Daniel," he said with false friendliness. "Mom told me about their mortgage situation. You work at that bank, right? Can you fix this for them?" "I don't have that kind of authority," I lied smoothly. "But I'm sure everything will work out at their meeting." "When is the meeting?" "Next week, I think. They'll meet with whoever's handling their case." Kevin sighed dramatically. "This is so stressful for them. They're really worried. And you know how Dad is, his blood pressure goes crazy when he's stressed. Can't you do something?" "Like what, Kevin? I'm just an entry-level employee, remember? Nothing important. That's what Dad said at your engagement party." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Come on, man. Don't be petty. This is serious." "You're right, it is serious," I agreed. "Financial management is very important. I'm sure the executive handling their case will be fair." I hung up before he could respond. The day of my parents' appointment arrived. I dressed carefully that morning. Expensive suit, silk tie, Italian leather shoes. I looked every inch the successful executive I had become. My assistant had scheduled them for 2 o'clock in the main conference room. I had intentionally not told them I would be conducting the review. I wanted to see their faces when they realized the truth. At 1:50, my assistant buzzed me. "Mr. and Mrs. Chen are here for their 2 o'clock appointment. Give them 10 minutes in the waiting area, then show them to conference room A," I instructed. "And hold all my calls." At exactly 2 o'clock, I walked into the conference room carrying their thick mortgage file. My parents sat on one side of the large mahogany table, looking nervous and small. They were dressed in their best clothes, clearly trying to make a good impression on the important bank executive they were about to meet. They looked up when I entered. For a moment, nobody spoke. My mother's mouth fell open in shock. My father's face went pale, then red. "Daniel," my mother whispered. "What are you doing here?" I sat down across from them, opened their file, and met their eyes with a professional smile. "I'm the Executive Vice President of Residential and Commercial Lending. I'm here to review your mortgage renewal application." The silence that followed was absolutely perfect. My father recovered first, his shock quickly turning to anger. "This is ridiculous. "You're not qualified to handle our mortgage. We need to speak to someone actually in charge." I kept my expression neutral and professional. "I am in charge, Dad. This entire division reports to me. I have final approval authority on all mortgage renewals over $500,000. Your mortgage is $620,000. That means I'm exactly the person you need to convince." My mother looked between us, confused and frightened. "Daniel, sweetheart, surely you can just approve this quickly. We're family." "That's exactly why I have to be more careful," I said calmly. "Any appearance of favoritism or special treatment could cost me my job and expose the bank to legal liability. So we're going to do this by the book." I opened their file and pulled out the financial documents. "Let's start with the basics. Your mortgage payment has been late twice in the past 14 months. Can you explain why?" My father's jaw tightened. "We had some unexpected expenses. It was only a few days late each time. 6 days late in March, 9 days late in October," I corrected, reading from the file. "Late fees were assessed both times. Additionally, your credit score has dropped 4 to 7 points since your last review. That's significant." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "We've been helping Kevin with some expenses. His apartment, his car, his wedding. We're his parents. We wanted to support him." "And that's admirable," I said. "But it's also put you in a precarious financial position." I walked them through every problem in their financial profile. The maxed out credit cards. The home equity line they had taken out and spent completely. The retirement savings they had withdrawn early, incurring penalties. Every poor financial decision was documented in the file in front of me. "Your debt-to-income ratio is now at 53%, I explained. "That's well above the recommended maximum of 43%. You're spending more than half your income on debt payments." My father interrupted angrily. "We don't need a lecture from you about finances. Just approve the renewal so we can leave." "I can't approve it as is," I said firmly. "The risk assessment is too high. However, I have several options I can offer you." I slid a document across the table outlining 3 possible scenarios. Option 1, renewal with modified terms. Your interest rate would increase by 2.5 percentage points, your payment would go up by $700 per month, and would require you to pay down $10,000 of your credit card debt within 6 months. My mother gasped. "We can't afford that." Option 2, refinance to a longer term, which keeps your payment similar to what it is now but extends your mortgage by 10 years. You'd pay significantly more interest over the life of the loan. My father shook his head. "We'll be 70 before it's paid off." Option 3, transfer the mortgage to a different lender. I can provide you with referrals, though I should warn you that with your current credit profile, you'll likely face even less favorable terms elsewhere. I closed the file and looked at them directly. "Those are your options." My mother was crying now, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "Daniel, please. There has to be another way. We're your parents." "And this is my job," I replied. "A job you called unimportant and mediocre. A job you've spent years dismissing as beneath me. But right now, this job you look down on is the only thing standing between you and losing your house." My father's face was red with rage and humiliation. "You're enjoying this, aren't you? Getting revenge for some imagined slight." "It's not imagined, Dad. You called me a disappointment in front of our entire family. You laughed when Kevin said I settled for mediocrity. You've spent years making it clear that I'm the failure son." I kept my voice calm and professional. "But this isn't about revenge. This is about banking regulations and risk assessment. Your mortgage is flagged because you're financially overextended. That's not my opinion, that's mathematical fact." My mother reached across the table. "We're sorry. We didn't mean those things. We didn't understand what you did." "You never asked," I said simply. "In 10 years, you never once asked about my actual job. You just decided it wasn't impressive enough and stopped caring." There was a long, painful silence. Finally, I spoke again. "I'm going to give you 2 weeks to review these options and make a decision. Schedule a follow-up appointment with my assistant before you leave. I stood up, gathering the file. For what it's worth, I recommend option 2. It's the most manageable given your current situation. As I walked toward the door, my father finally asked the question I had been waiting for. How long have you had this position? I turned back. I was promoted 3 weeks ago. Right after Kevin's engagement party, actually. The timing was interesting. 3 weeks, my mother repeated softly. You've been a vice president for 3 weeks, and you didn't tell us. Why would I? You've made it very clear that my career isn't worth discussing. You literally told Aunt Marie that you don't talk about what I do because it's not important. I paused at the doorway. But to answer your question more fully, I've been working at this bank for 10 years. I started as a junior analyst making $40,000 a year. I worked my way up through 6 different positions. I've been a vice president for 3 years and executive vice president for 3 weeks. My salary is $235,000 per year, plus bonuses and stock options. I manage over $500 million in loans. I own my apartment outright, no mortgage. And I have more in savings than you currently owe on your house. My parents stared at me, speechless. You didn't know any of that because you never asked. You just assumed I was unsuccessful because I didn't become a doctor or lawyer like you wanted. I opened the door. My assistant will schedule your follow-up appointment. Have a good afternoon. I walked out, leaving them sitting in stunned silence. Word spread through my family quickly. By that evening, my phone was exploding with calls and texts. My mother called 6 times. Kevin texted me, "What the hell did you say to Mom and Dad? They are freaking out." My aunt, my uncle, 3 cousins, everyone suddenly wanted to talk to me. I ignored them all. I had work to do, and their sudden interest in my life felt hollow and manipulative. The next morning, Kevin showed up at my office. My assistant tried to stop him, but he pushed past her and burst into my office. "We need to talk," he demanded. I looked up from my computer calmly. "You need an appointment. My assistant can schedule you for next week." "Don't give me that corporate bullshit. What did you do to Mom and Dad?" I leaned back in my chair. I reviewed their mortgage renewal application and presented them with their options based on their financial profile. That's my job. Kevin leaned on my desk aggressively. "You humiliated them. You told them their house is at risk. Mom has been crying for 24 hours straight." "Their house is at risk," I said flatly, "because they took on too much debt. Largely to support your lifestyle, from what I can see in their financial records." He flinched. "That's not fair." "Fair? You stood at your engagement party and called me mediocre in front of everyone. You laughed when Dad called me a disappointment. Now you want to talk about fair?" Kevin ran his hand through his hair, frustrated. "Look, I'm sorry about that. We all are. But you can't punish Mom and Dad for it." I stood up, walking to the window so Kevin couldn't see my face. "I'm not punishing them. I'm doing my job. They have 3 legitimate options for their mortgage renewal. All are standard for their risk profile. Then approve the renewal at their current rate." Kevin said desperately, "You're a vice president. You can do whatever you want." "No, I can't," I corrected. "I have regulatory obligations and fiduciary responsibilities to the bank. If I give them special treatment and they default, I could be fired and potentially face legal action. Is that what you want?" Kevin was silent. "This is what you all never understood," I continued, still looking out the window. "I take my job seriously. I worked for 10 years to get here. I'm not going to throw away my career and reputation to save Mom and Dad from the consequences of their poor financial decisions." "So what are they supposed to do?" Kevin asked quietly. I turned back to face him. "They're supposed to pick one of the 3 options I gave them. Or they can try to refinance with another bank, though I doubt they'll get better terms. Those are the choices." Kevin stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time. "When did you become so cold?" "I'm not cold. I'm professional. There's a difference. You just never saw me as a professional before because you were too busy looking down on me." He left without another word. After he was gone, My assistant came in. "Are you okay?" she asked gently. "I'm fine," I said. And surprisingly, I was. My parents scheduled their follow-up appointment for the following week. In the meantime, I received an interesting phone call. "Mr. Chen? This is Robert Morrison from First National Bank. I understand you're handling a mortgage review for James and Susan Chen?" I confirmed. "What can I do for you?" "The Chens contacted us about possibly refinancing their mortgage. We pulled their credit report and financial information. I'm calling as a professional courtesy to let you know we've declined to make an offer." I wasn't surprised. "May I ask why?" "Their debt-to-income ratio and recent credit history make them too high risk for our lending criteria. I suspect they'll hear similar responses from other institutions." After he hung up, I sat thinking about what this meant. My parents had tried to go around me, seeking better terms elsewhere. They had failed. I was their only option. Part of me felt vindicated. They had spent years treating me like I didn't matter, and now I was literally the only person who could help them keep their house. But another part of me felt sad. It shouldn't have come to this. They should have valued me all along, not just when they needed something from me. My assistant buzzed me. "Mr. Chen? Your mother is on line 2. She says it's urgent." I stared at the blinking light for a long moment before picking up. "This is Daniel Chen." My mother's voice was shaking. "Daniel, sweetheart, we need to talk. Not about the mortgage. Well, yes, about the mortgage, but also about everything else." "I'm listening," I said carefully. "Your father and I have been talking. A lot. About what you said in that meeting, about how we treated you, about how we never asked about your life or your job." She paused, and I could hear her crying. "We were wrong. We were so focused on what we wanted you to be that we never saw what you actually became. And what you became is incredible." I said nothing, waiting. "We called other banks," she admitted. "Nobody will refinance us. You're our only option. But I'm not calling to beg you to approve our mortgage. I'm calling to apologize for being terrible parents to you." Her words surprised me. I had expected manipulation, guilt-tripping, emotional pressure. Not a genuine apology. "We compared you to Kevin constantly," she continued. "We held up this impossible standard and made you feel like you weren't good enough. But the truth is, you worked harder than Kevin ever has. You built something real through your own effort. And we were too blind to see it." "Why?" I asked quietly. "Why did you treat me that way?" She was silent for a long moment. "Because I wanted to show off to my friends. I wanted to say my son was a doctor or lawyer, something impressive sounding that everyone would understand. Banking sounded boring. I didn't realize that boring can be important." We talked for almost an hour. My mother explained how she and my father had built their entire self-worth around their children's achievements. Kevin's flashy success was easy to brag about. My quieter career was harder to explain, so they dismissed it instead. "We didn't understand what you did, and instead of asking, we just decided it wasn't important," she said. "That was cruel and stupid. We see that now." "What changed?" I asked. "Why now?" "Sitting in that conference room, watching you handle our file with such competence and authority, that changed everything. We saw you the way your colleagues must see you. Professional, knowledgeable, powerful. And we realized we've been seeing you wrong for a decade." She took a shaky breath. "Then when we tried other banks and they all turned us down, we understood how much influence you actually have. You're not entry-level. You're not unimportant. You're someone who makes decisions that affect people's entire lives." I leaned back in my chair, processing this. "I appreciate the apology, Mom. I really do. But it doesn't change the mortgage situation. I still have to make a decision based on financial factors, not family relationships." "I understand," she said. "And we've decided to accept option 2, the extended term. It's not ideal, but it's manageable. We're also going to start paying down our credit cards and stop trying to fund Kevin's lifestyle." "That's a smart choice," I said professionally. "I'll have my assistant draft the modified agreement." "Daniel," my mother said softly. "Yes?" Can we start over? Not with the mortgage, with our relationship. Can you forgive us? I thought about her question for a long time before answering. Could I forgive them? Should I? They had caused me years of pain, made me feel inadequate, dismissed my accomplishments. But they were also my parents. Flawed, misguided, but capable of recognizing their mistakes. I can forgive you, I said finally. But things can't go back to the way they were. You need to actually know me, not just the version of me you wanted me to be. We want that too, she said. We want to really know you. Then here's what I need: respect for my career and my choices. No more comparisons to Kevin. No more dismissive comments about banking. And honest interest in my life, not just when you need something. My mother agreed immediately. Yes. All of that. Whatever you need. We scheduled a family dinner, just the three of us, without Kevin, to talk more after the mortgage paperwork was finalized. It felt like a small step toward healing. The follow-up appointment was scheduled for 2 days later. When my parents arrived, they looked different somehow. Less proud, more humble. Maybe even a little embarrassed. We reviewed the modified mortgage terms carefully. Extended term, same monthly payment, slightly higher total interest over the life of the loan. It wasn't ideal, but it was fair and manageable. My father signed each page without complaint. When we finished, he looked at me directly. I owe you an apology too, son. A big one. My father's apology was harder for him than my mother's had been. He wasn't good with emotions or admitting fault. But he tried. I was wrong about your career, he said stiffly. I didn't understand it, and instead of learning about it, I dismissed it. That was my failure, not yours. He looked down at his hands. When you were sitting across from us in that conference room, acting like a completely different person, confident, authoritative, in control, I realized I don't actually know my own son. And that's shameful. I felt a lump in my throat but kept my professional composure. I'm still the same person I've always been, Dad. You just never looked closely enough to see it. I know that now, he said. I want to do better. If you'll let me. We talked for another 20 minutes, not about the mortgage, but about my actual life. My career progression, my goals, the projects I was working on. He asked questions, real questions, not polite small talk. It felt strange but good. As they were leaving, my mother hugged me tightly. Thank you, she whispered. Not just for the mortgage. For giving us another chance. After they left, I sat in my office for a long time, thinking about forgiveness and second chances. I wasn't naive enough to think everything would be perfect from now on. Years of hurt wouldn't disappear overnight. But maybe we could build something new. Something better. My phone rang. It was Richard, my boss. Daniel, can you come to my office? The CEO wants to meet with you. I walked to Richard's office wondering what the CEO could possibly want. When I arrived, I found not just Richard but also Margaret Torres, the Chief Executive Officer of Metropolitan Trust Bank. She was legendary in the banking industry, brilliant, tough, and respected by everyone. Daniel, sit down, she said, gesturing to a chair. Richard's been telling me about your performance over the past few weeks. I'm impressed. Thank you, I said, genuinely surprised. Margaret pulled out a file. I recognized it as the report I had submitted on my mortgage review cases. I've been reviewing all the flagged accounts you've handled. Every single decision shows sound judgment, thorough analysis, and appropriate risk management. You're exactly the kind of executive we need leading this division. She looked at me directly. But I also heard through Richard that one of these cases involved your own parents. That must have been difficult. I nodded carefully, unsure where this was going. It was. But I handled it by the book, same as any other case. That's what impressed me most, Margaret said. You could have approved their renewal at favorable terms. Nobody would have known. Instead, you treated them exactly like any other client, fairly but without special treatment. That shows integrity. Richard smiled. That's why I recommended you for this position in the first place. Margaret closed the file. We're restructuring again, Daniel. We're creating a regional vice president position overseeing lending operations across 12 states. It's a massive job with a massive salary. I want you to consider it. I sat there stunned for the second time in a month. Regional vice president. That was 2 levels above where I currently was. It was the kind of position people spent 20 years working toward. The role would start in 6 months, Margaret continued. That gives you time to train your replacement and transition your current responsibilities. You'd be overseeing hundreds of employees and billions in loans. I don't know what to say, I admitted. Say yes, Richard suggested with a grin. You've earned this, Daniel. You've proven you can handle complex situations with professionalism and integrity. You're ready for this level. I thought about my parents, about Kevin, about all the people who had underestimated me. Then I thought about myself, about the kid who started as a junior analyst and worked 70-hour weeks to prove himself, who stayed quiet and focused while everyone around him assumed he was unsuccessful. Yes, I said firmly. I accept. Margaret shook my hand. Congratulations. We'll make the official announcement next week. As I walked back to my office, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, pride. Not arrogant pride, but genuine satisfaction in what I had accomplished. That evening, I called my parents and told them about the promotion. My mother cried happy tears. My father told me how proud he was, words I had waited years to hear. We're going to tell everyone, my mother said excitedly. Everyone who was at Kevin's engagement party, everyone we know. Our son is going to be a regional vice president. Kevin called me the next day. His tone was different from his usual arrogance, more subdued, almost respectful. Mom told me about your promotion. Congratulations. Thanks, I said, waiting for the catch. Listen, I've been thinking about what happened at my engagement party. The things I said about you settling for mediocrity. I was an asshole. I was quiet, surprised by the admission. I was jealous, Kevin continued. Everyone always talked about how smart you were, how you could do anything. It made me feel like I had to constantly prove I was better than you. So I put you down to make myself feel superior. That's not much of an excuse, I said. I know. But it's the truth. And I'm sorry. I'm genuinely sorry. We talked for a while, probably the most honest conversation we had ever had. Kevin admitted he was stressed about money, about trying to maintain an image of success he couldn't actually afford. His expensive lifestyle was funded largely by our parents' money, and he was realizing how unsustainable it was. I think I need to make some changes, he said. Be more like you, focused on actually building something instead of just looking successful. That would be smart, I agreed. We weren't suddenly best friends. Years of competition and resentment didn't disappear in one conversation. But it was a start. The official announcement of my promotion went out the following week. My phone exploded with congratulatory messages from family members, many of whom had barely acknowledged me at Kevin's engagement party. The irony wasn't lost on me. 6 months later, I sat in my new office, corner suite, top floor, with a view that stretched across the entire city. Regional Vice President. The title still felt surreal sometimes. My parents and I had dinner together every other week now. Real dinners where they asked about my work and actually listened to the answers. My mother had stopped comparing me to Kevin. My father had started telling his friends about my career with genuine pride instead of embarrassment. Things weren't perfect. Years of hurt couldn't be erased completely. But we were building something new, something healthier. They had learned to value me for who I actually was rather than who they wanted me to be. Kevin and I had developed a cautious friendship. He had scaled back his lifestyle, moved to a smaller apartment, and stopped relying on our parents' money. He was actually working on building real success instead of just performing it. One afternoon, my assistant buzzed me. Mr. Chen? Your parents are here. They don't have an appointment, but they said they have something for you. Curious, I told her to send them in. They walked into my office carrying a large framed photograph. It was from my promotion ceremony, me shaking hands with the CEO, both of us smiling. We wanted you to have this, my mother said. We had it professionally framed. We thought it should be somewhere you can see it every day. My father added quietly, we're proud of you, son. We should have said that years ago, but we're saying it now. We're incredibly proud of who you are and what you've accomplished. I felt tears threatening but blinked them back. Thank you. That means everything. After they left, I hung the photograph on the wall where I could see it from my desk. The disappointing son. The mediocre one. The one who settled. That's who they had thought I was. But I had never been that person. I had been building something real all along, brick by brick, promotion by promotion, success by success. They just hadn't been paying attention. Now they were. And while I didn't need their approval anymore, I had proven myself long before they noticed. It felt good to finally be seen. I turned to my computer and pulled up my schedule. Meetings with executives from 3 states, loan approvals worth $50 million, strategic planning sessions for next quarter. Important work. Meaningful work. The kind of work that changed people's lives. My parents had called me a disappointment. But I had never been one. I had just been waiting for them to open their eyes. And when they finally did, when they were sitting across from me in that conference room needing my approval for their mortgage, they had seen the truth at last. Sometimes the quiet ones are the most successful. Sometimes the ones you overlook are the ones with the most power. And sometimes the disappointing son turns out to be the one who saves the day. I smiled to myself and got back to work. Past was behind me. Future was mine to build. And nobody would ever underestimate me again.